Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 166, Lu'er. Early in the morning, Shen Zequin stared fixedly at those messy footprints and asked Fei Sheng, "Does it belong to a grain wagon?" The tracks left by the wheels were very distinct, a clear sign that it had been carrying a heavy load. "It's heavier than a grain wagon." Fei Sheng dropped to one knee and scrutinized it for a moment. "It looks like it was carrying some kind of heavy weaponry." "Master, they went to the trouble of taking a detour to Libya. Could they be thinking of launching another raid? The Shazan camp is now well equipped and well trained. With Guo Wulai stationed there and its location so close to Bianbo camp, it would be difficult to get anything good out of a raid without a large number of troops to back them up." Shen Zequin faced the south. "Furthermore, they are coming from Dun province. It's possible that they're thinking of transporting supplies to the border along the Hashi River." But what was there in Dun province? Dun province's granaries had long been squandered clean by the bandits. Furthermore, there were no garrison troops in Dun province, so why bother taking an unnecessary detour? Shen Zequin thought carefully for a moment, running through everything he remembered about Dun province. He recalled that the Biancha cavalry had used a stone catapult when they raided Bianbo camp during the 6th month. Taking a few steps along the wheel tracks, he suddenly spoke, "Military supplies, provisions, armaments." He turned back. After the defeat of the Zongbo troops, the Ministry of War didn't reclaim the armories of the 6 prefectures, intending to leave it for the re-established garrison troops. However, Chu capital was later negligent in their inspection rounds, and all of these armories were not mentioned again. Not bothering with the mud on his knee, Fei Sheng stood up. "Among them are plenty of heavy weaponry meant for sieges. If they fall in the hands of Biancha, then Duan province will be in imminent danger. Continue to follow them." Shen Zequin said. ******. The wheels got stuck in the mud, and the horses could not pull them out. Lu'er, who was wrapped up in a coat and wearing a Biangu hat, wanted to huddle up into a bundle, but he did not manage to do so. That Biancha man disguised as a traveling merchant yanked him by the ankle and dragged him off the wagon, then lashed at him with the horsewhip to wake him up as he cursed, "Get up! Go push the wagon!" Lu'er ouched a few times and hurriedly crawled to his feet before limping over to push the wagon. He was already advanced in age and his hands were shaky. Someone stomped on his feet and nearly made him kneel from the pain. There were many bandits escorting this wagon. All of their blades had been confiscated by the Biancha men, and they were now toiling as manual labor under the cracks of horsewhips. The bandits of Mount Luo returned home crestfallen following their defeat in Tse province, and news that Lei Jingzhi was a spy for the imperial army spread like wildfire. Subsequently, Mount Luo split up into over 10 small mountain strongholds that fought tooth and nail with one another. Lu'er, Ding Niu, and the others each formed their own group of bandits, wanting to recreate Lei Changming's glory and become the chief of Mount Luo. But who knew that they would be disbanded in Duan province by bandits who had the help of the Biancha cavalry? Not only did they lose their main forces, but they were also recaptured as the Biancha cavalry's prisoners. Ding Niu refused to transport grains for the Biancha cavalry and was killed at the end of the 7th month. Lu'er, who cherished his life, did not dare to resist any further and was now transporting the grain wagons for the Biancha people. Lu'er hunched over like a monkey, his long, drooping eyebrows quivering along with his movements. He blended in amongst the crowd, not daring to slack off right under the Biancha men's eyes. But even so, he did not escape a lashing. Lu'er grimaced in pain and tried his best to make himself smaller so that others would block the blows for him. The road was hard to navigate, and ragged panting filled the chilly night. These bandits who were used to riding roughshod over others could not hold up against the lashings of the Biancha people, and there were quite a number of people who were whipped until their skin was flayed open and their flesh was torn. The horse wagon came to a stop only during the hour of yin. Several rows of cavalry roved around the surroundings, hollering at the bandits to assemble and stand properly. Lu Er's coat had been shredded to ribbons by the whips, with wads of cotton spilling out. He held his arms around himself and waded in the muddy marsh with a build-up of a thin layer of ice on it. His robe was already in rags now, and both legs of his trouser fluttered to reveal a pair of legs that looked like hemp stalks. The old man was so freezing cold that he shivered. The Biancha men wanted to eat, so the bandits could only stand at their sides to shield them from the wind. Lu Er folded his arms up his sleeves. He was so hungry that he was seeing stars. He licked his lips and quietly squatted down to take a rest. When will these shitty days come to an end? A former subordinate before him muttered as he took off the cloth bag stuffed on his back and secured it on his waist. God damn it, they are going to whip me to death on this trip. These motherfuckers really don't hold back, whipping people like we are some kind of livestock. Lu Er shifted his feet. He was so hungry he could taste bile in his mouth, and yet he was still thinking of taking a smoke. He fumbled in his sleeves for a long time before fishing out some tobacco, whereupon he brought it to his nose and sniffed hard. They aren't educated, that's why they treated people as livestock, no. Those tattoos on their bodies are all of beasts and birds of prey. Heck, they even drink blood raw. The former subordinate spat. If I had known I'd end up this way, I'd have switched camps and joined the Imperial Army back in Tse province. Damn it. At least it wouldn't have given the Biancha people an advantage. Bullocks. Lu Er stuffed the tobacco back and sneakily peeked at the Biancha men through other people's legs. We are all bandits. What good ends can we come to by defecting over to the Imperial Army? We would still be traitors. These military weapons are being sent over to fight Libei and Zongbo. Who knows? Maybe even the emperor in Chu capital will be taken prisoner when the time comes. We might still even have to kneel to a Biancha emperor. Lu Er had not even finished his words when his former subordinate suddenly pulled him up. With his legs trembling, Lu Er stuck close to the group and stood straight, not even daring to glance around arbitrarily. The Biancha man was called Jida. His head was cleanly shaven, and the muscular arms he exposed had a poisonous scorpion tattooed on it. He passed by them while wiping his mouth, the expression in his eyes causing Lu Er's legs to tremble even harder, so much that he was about to pee in his pants. But Jida did not give them any trouble tonight and merely led his man to the front where the supply wagon carrying the mounted crossbow was parked. The Biancha people were very interested in giant siege weapons such as the mounted crossbows. The bandits remained where they were and rested. All their field rations were soaked and smelled musty. With his yellow tobacco-stained teeth, Lu Er ate the rations. The few of them huddled together to keep warm. Fortunately, it did not rain tonight, or the amount of people who froze to death would be more than just a few. They sat on the ground, not daring to fall asleep. But Lu Er was old. It gradually became harder for him to hang in there, and he eventually dozed off against the wheel. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Such a small number of troops following along. Fei Sheng squatted down once again and examined the footprints. Most of them are bandits pushing the wagon along. There aren't that many Biancha cavalry. The brigade commander put on his helmet and sat on his horse like a statue cast in iron. As he pulled the reins on his horse, he spoke in a deep, muffled voice, "They are in disguise because they don't want to alert others. I'm afraid they still have planted agents in Mount Luo. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to penetrate this far with these few people. Prefectural Lord, if you want to get to the bottom of who is on the inside collaborating with them, then we have to intercept them before they enter Mount Luo's territory and interrogate them." There were not that many men from the Libei armored cavalry following along, but they were all elites on the battlefields who had fought the Hanshi tribe with Xiao Fangxiu. With the Jin Yui's assistance in battle on such a dark night where the frost was heavy, intercepting this small batch of people would not be a problem. Shen Zequan took a look at the darkness of the night and ordered, "Ding Tao, stay where you are. Fei Sheng, go with the Libei armored cavalry." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Lu Er woke up from the freezing cold and rubbed both of his feet, feeling as if he was going to freeze to death. He raised his head and saw the Bianchi cavalry standing a distance ahead, crowding around the mounted crossbow. This crossbow was not something that could be drawn on a single man's strength alone. Usually, it would be used to bring up the rear and hold the battle array or to defend cities. It was an absolute heavy-duty weapon in combat and common in the Libe camps. The Bianchi cavalry had suffered and taken quite the beating in its hands. Lu'er did not call out to anyone. He propped his hands on the ground and used the wagon as a cover to make his way quietly to the back. He crawled under the bottom of the wagon, sticking close to the ground to hide from view. When he crawled to the end, he practically kicked out with his shoes and lunged forward, cutting a sorry figure as he broke into a run. Jida was wiping an arrow when he caught a flash in his peripheral vision. He bellowed in the Bianchi language, "Someone's fleeing." The Bianchi cavalry instantly mounted their horses and brandished their whips as they bellowed and chased after him. How in the world would Lu'er expect Jida to be so sharp-eyed? To think he could still catch sight of him from such a distance away and in such a dark night, too. He thought of stopping and giving them the excuse that he was merely taking a piss, but when he looked back and saw all those scimitars drawn out of their scabbards, he knew he would die if he did not escape tonight. Lu'er anxiously tightened his waist sash and kicked off his shoes in the mud. He fell, then climbed immediately to his feet. All he could see before him was the way Ding Niu looked when he died. They were able to rise to prominence on Mount Luo all because of the Bianchi cavalry, and now, it was also all because of the Bianchi cavalry that they had become prisoners on Mount Luo. Lu'er muttered unintelligibly as he prayed for help and pleaded with all the deities and Buddhas he knew of. Sores that had formed on this old man's soles made him scrunch up his face in pain. He was so fearful of death to the extent that he even wanted to kneel now and beg for mercy. But the bellows and cursing of the Bianchi cavalry made it clear that it would not be a simple matter of capturing Lu'er back. They had no lack of people. What they lacked were chickens that they could slaughter in public. Lu'er shivered and fell into a mud hole. The Bianchi cavalry surrounded him, and Lu'er promptly burst out crying. He raised both hands and felt himself peeing his pants in the icy cold, muddy water. The foul, turbid stench of urine soaked through the legs of his trousers. Lu'er could not understand the Bianchi language and could only kowtow to the cavalry in terror. "I'm at fault," Lu'er wailed hysterically. "Don't kill me." The Bianchi cavalry coughed a couple of times and spat thick phlegm on Lu'er's face. They smashed their scabbards down onto Lu'er's back, making him sprawl in the mud hole and drink filthy water. Both of Lu'er's long, drooping brows were lifted by the scimitars, and he drank that water in fear, crying and laughing as snot and tears soiled his face. Jida stood where he was and watched as the cavalry amused themselves with Lu'er. He propped up a leg and kicked away the fabric covering the mounted crossbow, then shouted for the men to drag Lu'er further away so that he could use Lu'er to test the crossbow. Lu'er was scared out of his wits on hearing the sound of the mounted crossbow being shifted. He kneeled on the ground as they dragged him away, slapping himself with both hands while cursing. Why the heck did he run? Lu'er slapped himself until his cheeks were red and swollen. They hoisted him up and hung him a distance away. Lu'er bent over at the waist and took in huge gasps of air as he watched the cavalry load the mounted crossbow with an arrow. That arrow was as thick as a child's arm, and its arrowhead was unusual, with a rounded end cast out of iron. When they rained down from the sky, the impact could send one's brain matter splattering all over. The wheel and axle started turning with a click. As long as Jida pulled the trigger, Lu'er would be able to see that arrow springing up high in the sky before hurtling down on himself. Lu'er voicelessly moved his mouth. In an unexpected burst of courage, he bared his yellow-stained teeth and burst out cursing, "Fuck your ancestors. Fuck all of your ancestors." Tears streamed down Lu'er's face as he choked with sobs so hard he looked as if he could breathe his last any time. He used to be a bandit in the past too, but he was not alone. He had a son and daughters back at home, and his wonderful wife was his childhood sweetheart who had followed him out of the village. It was only when husband and wife were past their prime that they bore 3 children. Of them, 2 were daughters who had been match-made in the 3rd year of the Xian era and would have been able to get married once winter that year passed. His son wanted to join the garrison troops, and Lu Er spent a long time buttering up to Lei Changming before he managed to send his son into the Duan province garrison troops. But in the end, the entire Duan province garrison troops perished in the Hashi sinkhole the year the Bianchi cavalry came to massacre the city. End chapter. Note: Biangu hat is a round hat with a brim. It originated from the Yuan dynasty and was commonly used by street youths, commoners, and servants. It was most popular during the reign of Emperor Jiajing of Ming dynasty and was commonly seen during the Qing dynasty. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 167, Guest. The sky was dark, and devoid of stars. Lu Er huffed white puffs of air in between gasps. He could no longer tell if he was dead or alive. He hung there, light as a feather, like a piece of cotton wadding in the wind. Jida could not operate the mounted crossbow. He shoved aside the subordinates by his side to check on it and continued to inquire about it in Bianchi language. As they were unfamiliar with such heavy weaponry, the subordinates called for a few bandits to take a look. Jida unscrewed his canteen to have a drink of water as he stood bare-chested in the chilly night and waited. Fearing that he would be implicated and face the same outcome as Lu Er, the former subordinate lay prone on the ground, not daring to move an inch. He stared at the trampled mud on the ground and saw the subtle tremors coursing through it. Thinking that it was caused by his own rapid breathing, he used both hands to cover his mouth and nose, but those tremors did not stop. Instead, they became even more pronounced. Jida was the first to sense something amiss. He stopped drinking and listened intently for a moment. Suddenly, he threw his canteen onto the ground and shouted, "The armored cavalry is here." But it was too late. The Libe armored cavalry that had been creeping forth for half the night in the darkness was like a fierce tiger pouncing with force so great that the wagon by Jida's side overturned with a loud crash. The startled horses neighed as they were dragged to the ground by the wagon that weighed up to 100 jin. That mounted crossbow sent mud splashing, and the wagons beside the former subordinate also shifted along with it. Several of the supply wagons haphazardly collided against one another without warning, and at that moment, chaos erupted as men and horses were thrown off their feet. Jida retreated swiftly and kept calm as he shouted, "Mount your horses." The Libe armored cavalry's battle steeds wore a full body of armor, and the sound of their hooves as they drew nearer sounded like muffled thunder to the ear. The heavily armored cavalry held no fear of the scimitars. They were like a dark, swarthy wall that directly cut across and broke the formation of the Bianchi's transportation squad. The battle steeds, donned in armors of iron gilded with long and thick spikes at the chest, were unstoppable when they charged straight on. Unable to run fast enough, the Bianchi cavalry was thrown to the ground and successively trampled to a bloody pulp before they could get back up. The helmeted brigade commander gestured with his hand to Fei Sheng at the side. Fei Sheng, assuming the light cavalry post, circled over into position and lowered his long sword together with the brigade commander, and in one coordinated move, charged towards Jida to flank him in a pincer attack. Jida mounted his horse, as if he had not sensed Fei Sheng approaching. He leaned over, and the pony under his crotch broke into a run like the fearsome wind. Jida stared fixedly at the brigade commander as their horses crossed paths in the blink of an eye. The brigade commander abruptly swung his long sword, intending to hack off Jida's head, but his swing had missed the mark, for Jida seemed to have disappeared into thin air. In the next instant, a blunt weapon slammed hard into the back of the brigade commander's head. The force of the impact instantaneously made him bleed from the mouth and nose and deafened him. That nearly sealed and airtight iron armor could stand up to blows from all sharp weapons but had a fatal weakness: it could not withstand the impact of blunt weapons. The brigade commander tumbled off the back of the horse and fell headlong to the ground. His ears were ringing like crazy, and he even felt sharp, stabbing pain. He tried to crawl to his feet, but his entire body was trembling too violently. Blood trickled out through the gap in his helmet. He could not hear his own voice clearly, but he continued to move his lips. Take off the hell. The iron hammer smashed down onto the back of the brigade commander's head once again. Blow after blow rained down on him, crushing that helmet until it was all deformed. Clotted blood spilled all over the ground. The brigade commander went silent. Jida squatted on the brigade commander's back and wiped off the blood on his scorpion tattoo, then stuck his fingers into his mouth. Contained in those sturdy muscles of his was a shocking amount of explosive strength. He lifted the iron hammer and locked his gaze on Fei Sheng. Fei Sheng felt his hairs stand on end, while the horse under him tossed its head in fear. Fei Sheng swallowed with difficulty. He had served as Jin Yi for so many years, and to think that he would be daunted back into a retreat by the expression in the other party's eyes. This was no ordinary Bianchi cavalryman, this was not even one of the Bianchi's elite forces. They were unlike Hassan's elite troops who carried scimitars and pike daggers. Instead, they were equipped with scimitars and iron hammers with protruding spikes. This was a Bianchi force that had never made an appearance before on the Libe battlefields. It was too terrifying. A strangled gasp escaped from Fei Sheng's throat. If such an iron hammer were to be delivered to the battlegrounds, then the Libe cavalry would become livestock at their mercy. All the advantages they derived from their armors would be rendered useless. Retreat. Fei Sheng yanked the reins and suddenly bellowed, "Retreat!" They had to shake them off. Fei Sheng turned the horse around and broke into a desperate run. But things did not go as planned. This peculiar, treacherous troop tailed him like shadows. It was clear that Jida had locked onto him as a target as he relentlessly followed hot on his trail. Both parties engaged in a cat-and-mouse chase in the darkness of the night. Fei Sheng had finally gotten his taste of the Bianchi cavalry that rumors were made of. The horse beneath him was a fine steed too, but it could not throw them off and widen the distance between them at all. Jida remained close on his heels. Jida's iron hammer came swinging at the back of Fei Sheng's head, and upon sensing it, Fei Sheng dodged by the skin of his teeth. The horse was running too fast, and all those jolts and bumps nearly caused Fei Sheng to slip off. He was far from being as adept at horsemanship as the Bianchi cavalry. At this moment, both parties were hundreds of paces away from the convoy squad. Fei Sheng came to the realization that he would not be able to shake off the other party. Likewise, the other man did not give Fei Sheng another chance to retreat either, as Jida had already caught up with him. Fei Sheng was not one of the Libe armored cavalry. The iron hammer was not that much of a threat to him. Thus, Jida swapped back to his scimitar. That crescent moon-like blade caught onto Fei Sheng's Xiaochun blade. The squads behind, having already converged together and began to fight at close quarters. Both men were still galloping on their horses as they barged headlong into the sparse forest. Withered branches lashed hard against his face. Fei Sheng could not draw back his ensnared blade at all. Jida revealed a cruel smile as he said to Fei Sheng in the Great Zhou's language with perfect enunciation, "You are welcome to be our guest." Fei Sheng wanted to retort back, but he was too preoccupied to speak. At the same time Jida leaned forward, he yanked his scimitar back, and Fei Sheng's Xiaochun blade promptly slipped from his hand and went flying. Following right after, his horse was rammed from the side, which knocked Fei Sheng off it. In the instant he rolled to the ground, he reached for the short blade from the side of his waist and brought it up before his face to parry the blow. Jida's scimitar slipped from his hand along with the Xiaochun blade. He relaxed his entire right arm and swung the hammer up into Fei Sheng's face. The blade Fei Sheng used to ward off the blow caved in from the impact, and his forearm went numb. He reacted swiftly and rolled away, then cast away the ruined blade. Unarmed, he maintained a certain distance away from Jida. Stooping over at his waist, Fei Sheng continued his retreat. He adjusted his breathing, then made a shoe sound at Jida as if to drive him away. Enraged now, Jida gripped his hammer tightly, but at the very moment he swung it up, he felt a sudden weight on his back. Ding Tao strangled Jida's burly neck with an arm from behind and strained to call out, "De Xiong." Before Ding Tao could finish his words, Jida grabbed him by the arm and yanked, intending to fling Ding Tao over the side of his shoulder to the ground, but a figure sprinted out from the side and lunged headlong at him, slamming his head into the side of Jida's waist. The impact from Li Xiong caused Jida to stagger, and Ding Tao seized the opportunity to break free. Li Xiong had been hiding in the horse carriage these days, having the time of his life eating. He stretched out both arms at once to wrap them around Jida's waist, then assumed the horse stance with the intent to lift Jida like he would a tree trunk. Jida swung the hammer and slammed it into Li Xiong's back. Li Xiong cried out in pain and shouted, "Tao Sui, it hurts." Ding Tao rubbed his numbed arm and said quickly, "Hit him with the Ji clan's fist." Thus, Li Xiong loosened his grip and bellowed as he threw out a fist at Jida's chest. Surprisingly enough, the force knocked Jida back 2 steps. Feeling giddy, Li Xiong followed up with several consecutive punches, every blow of his was striking flesh. He remembered all that Ji Gang had taught clearly. With the air of one unrivaled, he looked back and said, "He can't fight." Li Xiong had yet to finish his words when Jida backhandedly smashed him with the hammer and knocked him over to the ground. Even if this lad was a sturdy one, he could not withstand the blow. Fortunately, he reacted extremely swiftly and bent his arms to shield his head. But even so, the force of the blow knocked a tooth out. With blood in his mouth, he spat the tooth to the ground and felt the first spark of anger. "Blockhead! Get up!" Ding Tao yelled anxiously. Unable to get to his feet in time, Li Xiong could only roll out of the way for all he was worth. That hammer scraped past his cheek and slammed into the ground. Mud splashed Li Xiong full in the head. He repeatedly spat out the muddy water in his mouth. Ding Tao hit upon an idea in a display of quick thinking. He stirred the mud with his brush. Treading on Li Xiong's shoulder, he said, "Go." With a sudden flick of the brush, muddy water splashed into Jida's eyes. Jida hastily wiped it away. Taking advantage of the opportunity Ding Tao accorded him, Li Xiong propped both hands against the ground and slid over in an attempt to slip through under Jida's crotch. But he was too sturdy, and he had only just slid halfway when he got stuck. This lad had a one-track mind. He just had to go this way, and as he lifted himself with brute force, he knocked Jida over instead of sliding his way out. Ding Tao wanted to praise Li Xiong. Unexpectedly, Jida wiped away the muddy water and hauled Ding Tao by the ankle that Ding Tao had yet to retract. Ding Tao had come to grief many times in the past with this move, so he had long since learned to play it smart. The instant he felt the grip on his ankle, he promptly lifted both arms to protect the back of his head and closed his eyes as he plummeted to the ground. Immediately right after the fall, he shouted, "It doesn't hurt. I'm fine." Li Xiong climbed to his feet from the mud and tried to lunge over to hold Jida's neck in a chokehold, but he had only just pounced when Jida, who was already on guard, bent his elbow and slammed it into the bridge of Li Xiong's nose. Li Xiong instantly felt a stinging ache on the bridge of his nose. Jida followed up with another blow and sent Li Xiong flipping over into the mud, using so much force that blood spurted out of Li Xiong's mouth and nose. Jida moved his shoulders and arms about, the creak of which indicated that the fight earlier was just a joke in which he had been merely fooling around. His arms were far more thick and burly than Li Xiong's. As Li Xiong lay in the mud covering his nose and mouth, he caught a vague glimpse of the poisonous scorpion on Jida's arm. Ding Tao was lifted upside down, and the brush and notebook in his bosom slipped out along with the poisonous needles and secret weapons on him when Jida swung him up with all his might. Ding Tao reached out with both hands to grab them, failing which he yelled, "My candies!" But before he could bat an eyelash, Ding Tao saw his oil paper wrapped candies fall into a hand. Wind swept past their ears, and in this very instant, Jida saw a flutter of white sleeves descend onto the muddy surface, like a piece of drifting snow that arrived with the wind and then took off into the air again. The cold glint of Yangshan Shui was like the crystal clear ripples of autumn waters as it suddenly shot right towards Jaida's chest. Jaida could not retreat, so he cast Ding Tao aside in an attempt to free a hand to grab hold of Yangshan Shui's tip. However, Yangshan Shui was too fast. It took just an instant for the blade to make its way before his chest. Jaida failed to grab hold of it, and Yangshan Shui flicked up in tandem with the white sleeve to slash towards Jaida's throat. This time, Jaida swung his shoulder over to dodge it, using his shoulder to take the blow in the flesh instead. An expert. Jaida's became greatly alarmed. But then, it instantly dawned on Jaida. Even though Shenzhequan was as swift as a thunderbolt, that one blow of his earlier had also exposed the frailty of his constitution. Jaida let loose a sardonic smile and struck out towards the side of Shenzhequan's neck with a lightning move of his hand. As the white robe withdrew and seamlessly dodged out of the way like clouds and mist, he closed in and balled his fists to counter Shenzhequan's attacks, then grabbed hold of Yangshan Shui with a turn of his hand. With Yangshan Shui held down, Shenzhequan's arm also ended up being grabbed by Jaida. Jaida knew the other man was not an easy one to capture. With the latter's leg movements coincidentally restricted, Jaida seized this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and turned around so that his back was pressed up against Shenzhequan, then lowered his shoulder to fling Shenzhequan over to the ground. Shenzhequan almost coughed out blood from the force of it. He did not manage to break free when he got up, and sharp cracks rang out as he traded two blows with Jaida with his hands. Jaida, however, warded off his blows with sheer brute force. Jaida was not that meticulous in his study of martial arts and he did not want to waste too much effort on Shenzhequan over this. As he parried the blows, he sensed Shenzhequan abandoning the use of Yangshan Shui, so when Shenzhequan rose with a lift of his waist, he swung his hammer over. This strike sent the hammer smashing into the tree trunk, and as he had expended too much force, Jaida could not pull the hammer out. Shenzhequan was relatively shorter, and as his pitch-black eyes locked onto Jaida, Jaida heard the crack of something snapping. While he could not figure out what the sound was at the moment, he could acutely sense the danger he was in. Almost immediately, he abandoned his hammer. But before Jaida could make a move, Shenzhequan had already struck out at him. He was much faster than before this time, as though he had been planning for this moment since the very beginning, waiting and luring Jaida in until the latter got accustomed to the rhythm of his movements. Jaida even went as far as to suspect that Shenzhequan was not injured at all, that his frailness from before was all an act. But Jaida did not have the chance anymore. Fresh blood spewed from his neck, spraying all over Shenzhequan's face. His throat bobbed, he could not believe he would be defeated in this place. He shifted his gaze sluggishly and saw a pair of deep, unfathomable eyes. Shenzhequan seemed to finally remember to say his greetings. With his expressive eyes half closed, he said amicably to Jaida, "You are welcome to be our guest." The moment the words left his mouth, Jaida fell over on his back to the ground, with half a brush sticking out of his neck. Ding Tao was still badly shaken when Shenzhequan let his fingers drop to toss the candies into his arms. Ding Tao caught it in a daze and saw the oil paper red with blood that had already seeped all the way in. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 168, Scorpion. All at once, Fei Sheng calmed down. He promptly propped himself up and came over to pick up Yangshan Shui for Shenzhequan. But when he bent over, he noticed something odd about Shenzhequan's right arm. As his gaze glided up from the opening of Shenzhequan's sleeve, he realized Shenzhequan's entire right arm was trembling. Thick, sticky blood coated the tips of Shenzhequan's fingers. Jaida had almost broken off his fingers when they traded blows earlier, and this kind of trembling was not something he could control now that the fighting had suddenly come to a halt. But he could not reveal the slightest hint of pain, given that the armored cavalry had just suffered heavy casualties. Jida had hammered the brigade commander until the latter's brain matter had splattered right before everyone's eyes. Shenzhequan had to stabilize their morale so that it would not continue to plummet. Master, Fei Sheng called out in apprehension. They are already assembling the bandits in the back to reorganize the convoy squad. Shenzhequan always brought along the blue handkerchief on him, but he could not bear to use it to wipe the blood. This was something he had taken from Xiao Qi Ye. He continued, "Tell the Libe armored cavalry to take off their helmets. Don't panic. With the mounted crossbow bringing up the rear, the foes will be merely sitting ducks." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Both of Lu'er hands were shivering. He had already been released and lowered. The blowing wind was so cold it gave him a chill between the legs. The former subordinate took advantage of the chaos to drag him along, pushing and shoving as he urged, "Run! Run!" Lu'er looked stiffly at the convoy squad that had been thrown into confusion and asked feebly, Who came?" "The Libe armored cavalry." The former subordinate tore off the cloth bag on his waist and threw it away along with the chains he had been fitted with. "Let them fight. Let's go." But the former subordinate failed to move Lu'er, so he pinched him and cried out in anxiety, "Old man Lu, what are you doing?" Lu'er's feet scraped across the ground as he stooped over and refused to leave. With a savage expression, he said, "We'll leave. But we also have to give these bastards a stab before leaving." He pushed the former subordinate away and staggered forward. "Son of a bitch aimed at me with the crossbow. Those bastards." He fell onto the ground, then got up again and muttered, "I want to smash them to death. Smash them all to death." The men in Shenzhequan's retinue who had arrived after Shenzhequan summoned the bandits together to work as one and pull up the overturned wagon. The mounted crossbow was stained with mud, and Lu'er hastily wiped it clean with his sleeve. He squeezed among the crowd, exerting force in regular bursts along with the shouts as they hoisted the long arrows up and pulled. 100 paces away, Fei Sheng scrambled out and blew a quick whistle at the Jin Yue who were still engaged in battle with the Bianchi cavalry. The Jin Yue promptly pulled back and retreated as they held up against the remaining Libe armored cavalry. The Bianchi cavalry who still remained in the clearing waited but never got Jida's commands, and by the time they realized it, it was already too late. The very moment the click of the trigger sounded, Lu'er felt intense pain in both arms. He watched those long arrows shoot into the sky before plunging, their impact slamming the Bianchi cavalrymen who had nowhere to hide onto the ground along with their horses. It was almost instant death for those men. Lu'er raised both arms and burst out laughing madly. He stood on tiptoe, finding this moment to be the most gratifying time in his life. Very quickly, the arrows were depleted, and the Bianchi cavalry who had been dealt severe blows were too powerless to resist. Their small numbers prevented them from getting into formation, and it just took a couple of rounds from the mounted crossbow for them to break up and scatter. The former subordinate pulled Lu'er by the collar and shouted over the din, "Old man Lu, we should run now." Although they were captives, they had escorted the transportation of military supplies for the Bianchi people. Moreover, they even led them towards Zongbo. The Libe armored cavalry and the Bianchi cavalry were sworn enemies with a blood feud between them. So, if they were to fall into the Libe armored cavalry's hands, they would still have to die. Lu'er hurriedly leaped off the wagon and limped along. "Go, go, go. Move." As if in tacit agreement, the bandits wanted to take to their heels and flee the moment they saw the cavalry retreating. But the squad behind them was long prepared for this and drew their blades to surround them, blocking off their paths so that they had no choice but to return to their original spot. Thrown into disarray, the bandits crowded together within the ring of horses' hooves. They wanted to break through the encirclement, but they had no blades. Gradually, they all squatted down amidst the shouts at them and held their heads, not daring to make a ruckus again. Fei Sheng and a few of them sent Shenzhequan back to the horse carriage. The moment the curtain fell, they heard the dull, muffled sound of coughing. Gripping his candies, Ding Tao's eyes reddened. He was at a loss as he tugged on Fei Sheng's sleeve and said in a teary tone, my young master. Fei Sheng covered Ding Tao's mouth with his palm and gestured around him to have the Jinyi Wei surround the horse carriage, thus setting the carriage apart from the armored cavalry and the bandits. Shen Zequan bent over the seat. On his open palm was blood that he had just coughed out. The index and middle fingers on his right hand were racked with hot searing pain, as if they were being ripped apart. He had not bent over to pick Yang Shan Shui up earlier because he could not lift it. He lowered his head, pressing against his forehead, and forcibly swallowed down the blood that still wanted to gush up his throat. A long time passed. Shen Zequan's voice sounded particularly low and deep across the curtain. Do a head count of the bandits and get them to continue pushing the wagon. Send someone to rush post-haste to Bianbo camp and convey the news about this squad to Xi'an. Then send someone to hurry to Tse province and inform Yuan Zhou to reassure Zhou Gui before my return. As long as King Yi has not dispatched his troops, Tse province must not make the first move, no matter what King Yi says. Then, the Biancha captives, Fei Sheng moved close to the curtain and asked carefully, are we to keep them? Remove their blades and hammers. Shen Zequan clenched his palm and shifted his gaze under the darkness. Execute them on the spot. The sky cleared up the next day. Li Xiong crouched beside Jaida's corpse, looking as if there was something he could not figure out. He kept fiddling with Jaida's arm and looking at that poisonous scorpion over and over again. Fei Sheng came over to boot Li Xiong and said, Master had the others clear away the bodies. Why aren't you allowing them to? Li Xiong was still angry. He pulled Jaida's arm up and pointed to the scorpion. Why does he have the scorpion, too? He can't have a scorpion. Fei Sheng initially wanted to make fun of this silly lad, but the gears started turning in his mind, and he crouched down as well to ask Li Xiong, why can't he have a scorpion? Have you seen this before? Li Xiong pointed to the back of his neck and answered, my big bro has one lying here. Fei Sheng felt a chill run down his spine. With his heart in his mouth and sweat trickling down his spine, he asked, when did Lei Jingzhi have it tattooed? Why has there never been a word of it on Mount Luo? Li Xiong tried his best to think as he pulled at his hair. I don't remember either. He had it a long time back. He already had it when he raised me. Geedle has a lot of scorpions. My big bro took me there at that time and even wanted to have it tattooed on me. Geedle. Fei Sheng stood up at once and turned around to hurry towards the horse carriage. Shen Zequan was still resting. He drained the medical decoction from the morning like it was water. Ding Tao, who was keeping guard outside the carriage, heard Shen Zequan cough several times. The medicinal smell wafted out from within, but no one dared to lift the curtains. Fei Sheng did not dare to either, but this was a matter of great importance, so he placed a hand on the carriage for support and called out in a soft voice, Master, Master. Shen Zequan was sleeping lightly. In fact, he had been semi-conscious the entire time. He leaned on his side against the pillow. The delayed onset of pain of the injuries on his back was taking hold now, and he was in so much pain that he could not lie flat. He removed the jade earring and wiped it for a long time before it became clean. Only then did he open his eyes and make a sound of acknowledgement. Fei Sheng, even more cautious now, reported what he had heard earlier. There was only silence from the interior of the carriage for a long time before Fei Sheng heard the rustling sound of sliding sleeves. After another moment, the curtain was lifted by a folding fan. With the fan in his left hand, an earring on his right ear, the expression in Shen Zequan's eyes was much more piercing than ever. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The situation last night had been so critical that no one had paid any attention. With Li Xiong now standing beside Jaida, the one thing that they had overlooked had become all the more apparent. Physique-wise, Jaida was essentially what Li Xiong would grow up to become as an adult. They were both powerfully built, far more than the average man. Their shoulders and arms were broad, their muscles rippling with astonishing explosive power. Shen Zequan lowered his folding fan and moved Jida's arm over. Is it exactly the same? Li Xiong squatted and nodded sullenly. Big Bro's scorpion is a little smaller. Shen Zequan said to Fei Sheng, strip these corpses of their clothes. Not long after, the Biancha cavalry who perished last night lay stark naked across the ground. Fei Sheng examined them one at a time and found that all of them had scorpion tattoos. It was just that the scorpions were all freely positioned and hidden at locations that were hard to discover, such as the nape, pit of the stomach, side of the waist, and even behind the ear, but they were all on the upper body. Shen Zequan asked the Libei armored cavalry, are there scorpions like this on the battlefields? The remaining squad commander of the armored cavalry looked carefully at the tattoos and solemnly shook his head. Never seen them before. The 12 tribes of Biancha indeed have the habit of tattooing their bodies, but those are either tribal totems or symbols of meritorious service. There are no scorpions in the 12 tribes. Shen Zequan had an ill sense of foreboding. This was a squad that could deal a heavy blow and inflict heavy casualties on the Libei armored cavalry. Once they became a prevalent force in the war, the standoff on the battlegrounds would take a sudden turn for the worse. It would catch the generals of Libei off guard and put them at a disadvantage. If they were really establishing a squad based on standards that Li Xiong exemplified, then it would not matter even if they were to lose their battle steeds. As long as they could breach Libei, all of Great Zhou would be in imminent danger, let alone Zongbo. Scorpions are everywhere in Guidal. Big Bro called them brothers, they are our friends. As Li Xiong spoke, he looked at Shen Zequan. They have many small scorpions too. They are very young and never come out to play. Fei Sheng. Shen Zequan said immediately. Copy down this scorpion and bring it to Libei together. Not just Libei, but also Tse province and Cha province. Tell Zhou Gui and Luomu to start checking the commoners in the territories immediately. He paused for a moment, then emphasized his words. Especially the garrison troops. Lei Jingzhi was a native of De province. In the years that Zongbo was out of control, anyone could freely get in and out of Zongbo as he did. They could let in the scorpions, and even send the scorpions deeper into Great Zhou. What Shen Zequan had thought of at this moment was not just the war, but also of the decaying of government administration since the reign of Emperor Yanji. From the Zongbo troops' defeat to Xiao Jiming's poisoning, and Fen Yishan's death in battle to Lu Guangbai's desertion. They used to focus their attention on Chu capital and the noble clans, but it had all become rather odd starting from the military grain case onward. Xue Xiaozuo wanted to revitalize Great Zhou. Forcing Lu Guangbai into desertion would not do him any good. Why would the Chu capital make light of Qidong military provisions when they knew full well that there was ill will between them and Libei at the same time? Shen Zequan's memories swiftly went backward in time. Watching scene after scene of the past flash away felt like he was once again standing in the summer heat of Chu capital. Who exactly had delivered the relay report to Wei Huiguo's desk and subsequently forced him to his death? Shen Zequan suddenly broke out coughing. He clutched the blue handkerchief and covered his mouth and nose. But this cough was so violent that it not only startled Ding Tao, even Fei Sheng's face turned pale. Master! Fei Sheng made to support Shen Zequan by the arm. Escort the military supplies back to Tse province. Shen Zequan said behind the handkerchief. There's no need for the armored cavalry to follow any further. Leaving a few men behind will suffice. We'll head for Dun province today in disguise. Guidal had Bai Cha's portrait, while Dun province had Shen Wei's Prince of Jiangxing's manor. These were the two key locations where it all began, along with the two bloodkin with inextricable ties to Shen Zequan. I want Lei Jingzhi as well. Shen Zequan's expression was cold and detached as he enunciated each word. Alive. End chapter.